Welcome back to Ta-da 3D printing. We are into the second chapter of the Mark IV kit assembly. This is the frame assembly, and this is really the first chapter where we're going to start building anything, start putting it together. I am going to go step by step through the instructions, even though some of them may seem like they don't need a whole lot of explanation, because I found sometimes I would be looking for a part and I couldn't find it. So I wanted to make it as in-depth as possible, but I am going to speed through some of the things, like if I'm screwing in a very long screw, you don't need to watch me do that for a minute. So I will kind of speed things up with that. Also, when I first started recording, I was trying to talk through all the steps out loud, and I realized that the sound was not super great. So once I get through that section, which is about a couple minutes in, I'm going to start just doing voiceovers so that it can be a little bit more consistent throughout. And the only tools we'll need in this chapter is going to be the Allen keys. Step 2 is going to be the YZ frame parts preparation. So we're going to get both sets of the extrusion and the printer frame and some screws. The screws are the M5 by 16R. And we'll pick up where I stopped on the first video. I had the frame box already removed. This was at the bottom of the assembly kit box. First, let me get the tools out. So in this one, the fasteners and electronics. We have, of course, different extruder box and the electronics. We'll keep that for later. But there's a lot of bags in here, so I'm thinking that it's probably where we're going to find the tools. Okay, so here we've got tools. Tools bag. I think that's all I need for now, and then I'm gonna work on the frame. So let's get this out of the way. Okay, so I have another steel sheet in here. And it looks like I also have the heat bed. Okay, so this is what I was looking for, was the frame. I don't think that I need this interior one yet. And then on the extrusion and plates set, I'm going to need to get out, let's see, these plates I don't think I need yet, but I'm looking for these parts of the frame. Also going to need 16 screws. So I have not yet found the screws. I would imagine that they're in here with the fasteners. Okay, here I've got an entire bag of fasteners. And I am looking for, I'm on step 2, and I need 16 and 5 16ths. Okay, there we go. 5 by 16 are 34 pieces, and I need 16 at the moment. Okay, so I need to take the longer extrusions and place them on the front of the frame and make sure that the Prusa logo is showing towards the front on the top left. Put the screws in from the back of the frame and make sure I'm using the correct holes that are closer to the center. Tighten them in a diagonal pattern and go ahead and tighten them completely. So even though it says to do it like this, we're going to be putting screws in from the opposite side. Maybe I can do that from the other side. And it looks like from the picture, I'm going to be dealing with these holes here. Not the inset ones yet. We have the inset and then this one. Okay. So that's 8. Okay, so Prusa, this doesn't look like these go a different direction. And I want to figure out what tool will fit that one. Okay, so I've got my hex keys. This one looks rather large, so I'm going to try first the largest one. Yeah, that's going to be the one. So we'll just start with it. Okay, let's speed this up just a little bit. I do end up switching to a different screwdriver that works a little bit better for this section. Okay, this is how the frame looks now. Step 4 is the YZ mounting the shorter extrusions. So those ones are going to go on the back of the frame where there is the hexagon pattern. And of course we need to make sure we're putting them in the right area. We are going to use the same screws and also go in a diagonal pattern. This IKEA tabletop has some scratches on it, but I feel like I'm making more scratches, so I'm going to put this cutting mat underneath it to see if I can help protect it just a little bit more. Now we need to check that the frame has everything in the right direction. The longer sections are on the front and the shorter are on the back. And I do have the Prusa logo facing towards the front, and it's the smoother edge as well. Step 6 is to get the plates ready. We will start with the front plate, which is the smaller of the two. We need to have screws as well as the M3NE nuts. We will be placing the plate on there and tightening it, but not all the way down, just enough to secure it, and of course still go in the diagonal pattern. Here are the plates, and we are looking for the smaller one, and it looks like it's reversible from the front to the back. They look the exact same. So we're going to set that on the side with the longer extrusions, and then attach all of the screws. So on the back we will be putting that plate, but we need to make sure that we include the nuts first. So there's going to be 2 on each side, and they need to be on the side facing out. So I flip the frame around to where the shorter sections are, and I locate the bag with the M3NE nuts, and these are kind of a square nut that has a little bit of a beveled edge on one side. There are 5 in this bag, one of them's a spare, so we're pretty much using everything in this bag. These slide in easily on the outside channel here, and it says that it doesn't matter exactly where they are. You just need to have 2 on each side. They don't have to be centered or placed anything specific right now. And then we're going to attach the back plate with the rest of the screws, and we want the sticker to be facing out. And like the front plate, we will be putting them in at a diagonal, and we will just fasten them, but they don't need to be completely tight yet. We want to be able to adjust them a little bit in the next step. I had a little bit of trouble on this very last section to get the last 2 screws in, and I think it was because I just had the other areas a little bit too tight. Okay, step 10, we need to check that everything is perfectly square. So really you're just checking if it wiggles a little bit too much. It feels like it wiggles on the cutting mat, but when I put it on the table, it does feel a lot better. It feels like it's shifting a little bit too much, so I do adjust it a little bit by loosening the front, especially that area where I seem to be having a little bit of trouble the first time. And I'm able to get it pretty square. It does say that there can be about 2 millimeters difference of one of the corners lifting, so I finally get it adjusted as much as possible. Step 11 is mounting anti-vibration feet and the cable clip, so I need to locate all of those. And the anti-vibration feet go on all 4 corners, just a little bit in from the edge of the frame. Both of these things are located in the fasteners box. There is a bag called frame. It looks like this. This first rubber foot that I pull out has kind of, looks like maybe it wasn't completely cut out of its original whatever they stamped it out of. So there's a little bit of like a lip on there, or a brim almost. But they are rubber, they're not 3D printed. And the other three look fine. So I turn the frame on the side to get access and add the feet. These pop in easily and everything feels secure. Step 13 is installing the cable clip. Hook the side with the clip into the inner groove of the lower longer extrusion. You will feel it clip in, and when it's turned on its side like this, there will be 5 clips. Then we'll turn the frame and add 2 more. The clips are found in the same frame bag that the feet were in. Okay, so I have the frame with the longer sections towards the front, and you're going to clip it 3 on this first section, the longer section. You're going to clip it inside that front part. They will snap in along the channel. I tried really hard to get these to snap in the correct direction, and I didn't get them correct. I found out later. They're in the right place, but a few of them I had flipped. But it's not a big deal. When you're putting the wires through later, you can adjust it. There's the 2 more on the back shorter section. And then I flip the frame around and add the other 2. And these ones are also going to be on the inner part of the extrusion frame. And they go on the back shorter section. Okay, that works for now. Step 15 is the PSU parts preparation. So you're going to get the Delta PSU, M3x10 screws, and M4x10 R screws with the dome head. We'll be attaching the M3 screws into the nuts on the shorter section of extrusion along the back, but just enough to keep it in place, because then we're going to be setting the PSU on those screws, and we'll have to be able to adjust them a little bit. We'll tighten them until the PSU can be kept vertical, and then on the next step we're going to attach it to the frame. I locate the Delta PSU. I find the M3x10 screws and realize there's a ton in here. It says 79. I'm sure I'm not going to be using them all on the next step, so I go out and get a small container to put these in. This is actually a small bathtub without a faucet, just so that I can get the correct amount of screws out, and then I can set the bag in there, and then if it falls over, then I'm still have them all contained. Some of these screws come in a Ziploc that you can re-secure, like this M4x10R, but they sent 3, one's a spare, so I'm really not going to be getting into it again. I'm not sure why some have Ziplocs and some don't. So I screw in the M310 screws from this direction. It's going to be on the left side. I have been using this screwdriver, and I have to find a different bit for these screws. Now I can open the PSU package, and I'm looking for these little notches on the bottom. That's where the screws will slip in. And then I tighten them up a little bit so that this PSU isn't so flimsy, it's not going to fall over. Now we're on step 17, and we're going to attach the PSU to the frame. We want to check that it's on the back right side of the frame when looking from the front. We'll use the rounded M410 screws to attach it to the frame, and then we'll be able to tighten the M3 screws on the bottom that we had left just a little bit loose. Okay, looks like I have the PSU where it needs to go, so I'm going to go ahead and attach it with these screws. And there are multiple holes along this section, but it seems pretty easy to line it up, and that'll help you be able to slip it tight so that you can secure it completely. Now I can turn this and secure the M3x10 screws that were along the bottom. Step 18 is the buddy box preparation. We're going to need the buddy box, the thermal pads in a couple different sizes, some more screws. The buddy box case is in with all the printed parts box. The first thing that I see when I open the box is obviously a lot of printed parts, but it's just the cover. The box that we're looking for is underneath all of those printed parts. And the thermal pads that we're looking for are still in the frame box. They're at the bottom. You can see they're blue and white. And then it takes me a little bit to find these M3x6 screws. They're another one that I'm going to probably have to put in a little tub, because it looks like I would make a mess of all of these different screws. I assumed that I would need the cover at this point, but you really don't need it yet. And then I get a couple more M3 by 10 screws as well. I get the thermal pads out. It's the one long skinny one and then two small square ones. We're gonna hold off on the big square one till another step. Step 19, we're gonna prepare some more items for the buddy box. Now we are going to get the buddy board. We're going to get 4 zip ties and the X holder. I looked through the fasteners box for the buddy board. I was expecting them to be in one of these cardboard boxes, but it's not. It's bubble wrapped along the back of it. So there we go, the buddy board. In the printed parts box, I find the X holder in the bag entitled Frame. And this is what it looks like. I looked for quite a while for the zip ties. I really thought it would be in with the fasteners, but it actually is in with the printed parts or the plastic parts. Step 20 is mounting the buddy box, and this is similar to when we mounted the PSU. We're going to insert 4 M3 by 6 screws to the back of the frame. This is the side with the shorter extrusion, and you'll see the hexagon pattern. Tighten the screws in fully and then loosen them back out to leave a little bit of space so you can set the buddy box. And then secure the M3 by 10 screws into the square nuts on the second short extrusion right there, and just secure them, but don't tighten them all the way. I need to flip this around so I can get to it. There are 4 sets of holes here, and counting up from the bottom, these are the ones that are going to be the first set and the third set. We're going to skip the second and the fourth. And then the other 2 screws will go in the nuts along the channel on the extrusion, like on the other side. Step 21, we will set the buddy box on the screws with the same notches as the other side, but we're going to start with screwing it to the frame. These 2 notches on the bottom are what you're looking for. Set them on the 2 screws along the bottom and then slip it into the screws on the frame. The buddy box has keyholes, so that's a little bit larger hole on one side, so you may have to wiggle it a little bit to slip it in, but all of them will be visible after that. Step 22 is to tighten all of the screws. We'll start with the ones on the frame, the 4 on the frame, and then we'll do the 2 along the bottom. Because this is a tight space, I was not able to use the screwdriver that I had been using, so I'm going to have to go back to the Allen key, and then the 2 along the bottom. Step 23 is applying the thermal pads to the buddy board. We're going to start by removing the white layer and then setting them in the spaces provided. There are squares that are the right size. And to protect the buddy board, rather than holding it in your hands, it's recommended to just set it on the soft pad, so I'm assuming that means the bubble wrap. And then we'll remove the blue side as well. Okay, so I'm going to cut this open and hope I'm being careful enough. And then I'm going to try not to touch it too much. So I'm just going to slide it out. I don't want to just drop it either. So I'm just touching it along the edges. And you can see the spots where we're going to be putting it. 1 long one and 2 small squares. The white side seems to remove pretty easily, and I get them placed. One of them looks just a little bit crooked. I'm hoping that'll be okay. We're going to turn the frame on its side again so that we can access this area. And rather than just sticking it in there, we need to make sure that it is going to line up with all of these screws and make sure that all of the screws are accessible before tightening them all down. Okay, so I had removed the blue side as well, so these are all sticky sides. Okay, flip the frame over and set it on its side so we can see here. Okay, and you can see the little bit of black spacers where the screws are going to go. I was really worried that the adhesive on the back was going to be impossible to move, so I'm very hesitant to even set this. I think I was picturing super glue or something. But I do get it aligned enough, and I end up being able to scoot things around a little bit just to get those screws in. I end up dropping the screw several times until I finally switch back to my regular screwdriver. I assume these bits are slightly magnetic or something to help keep the screw in place a little bit better. After fitting all of them in place, then I go back and tighten them all. Step 25 is attaching the zip ties in these 4 areas. We're going to use the X holder as a guide to slip this through without damaging the buddy board. And I need to make sure that the teeth of the zip tie are on the visible side, and do this for all 4. Okay, so this X holder is going to be our guide, and this kind of smaller side towards the right is what we're going to be using. And you can just barely see the little like almost loops on the buddy box that we're going to be slipping this through. The teeth on the visible side doesn't really make sense to me. I go with the slick side out. The slick side is what's going to be slipping along this guide. And I do have to kind of feed it in and pull it at the same time to get it. And then I just try to do it about halfway. And then repeat again for the other 3 areas. Step 26 is preparing the Y belt idler. We're going to grab that as well as 2 more screws and 2 3NS nuts. And then we're going to put these square nuts on both sides of the belt idler. In the printed parts box, there is a bag entitled Frame, and we're looking for this little triangle piece. And I can clean up and move some of these other things. The X belt I'm going to put back in the printed parts box so I know where it is, and get out 2 M3x10 screws and 2 M3NS nuts. These are the little square ones. The instructions say that you can push these in with an Allen key, but that doesn't seem to work for me. I felt like I was just kind of slipping a little bit. So I end up using the pliers. That helps me position the nut, and then I'm also able to get it to slip in all the way. I reposition the frame to see where I'm going to be putting this, and then realize that I still have another nut that I've got to put in. And I put this one in the same with the pliers. Step 28, we're going to attach the Y belt idler to the front of the frame with 2 M3x10 screws. And it needs to be positioned so that it kind of slopes away from you. And we can fully tighten these down. Step 29 is assembling the Y motor parts preparation. So that's the other piece that was in the frame bag, as well as the thermal pad and M3x18 screws, M3x10 screws, and M3NS nuts. I am glad that this bag lists both the idler and the piece for the Y motor, but it would be nice if this one had pictures because I need all the help that I can get. And then in the frame bag that was from the fasteners, there is one more thermal pad. This one's a lot larger. We need 3 M3x18 screws. This one is in a Ziploc reclosable packy. 2 M3x10 screws, and then 2 more of the M3NS square nuts. Step 30, we're on to the first motor. This will be assembling the Y motor. I'll need to locate that, as well as a small pulley. And then I'll need to insert the 2 square nuts. One is along this side here, and one is along the back. And then we'll attach it to the motor. Okay, so in the motor kit box, we have several different pieces, several motors, and it is the one in the center. And it is labeled Y-axis. The pulley is found in the frame fastener bag. This is the last thing that's left in this bag. Okay, so the square nuts, one goes along the back here, and one goes along the side here. I'm able to use the pliers to get them to both set in there, but they don't quite fit in all the way, and it doesn't seem like I can push it all the way. I can see that the hole isn't quite lined up. So I get the smallest Allen key, and I'm able to make sure that it is in the right spot. And the same with the nut on the back side. I have to kind of just slip it into place. And then I make sure that the motor is positioned the way it is in the picture with the cord facing down, and then position the holder on top and secure the screws. And these are the 3 longer, the M318. And on to step 32, there's a couple of warnings on this. So the flat part of the motor shaft, rotate the shaft so that the flat part is facing you through the opening in the Y motor holder. Attach the pulley on the shaft and ensure that one of the grub screws is facing the flat part of the shaft. Do not tighten it yet. And then put one of the Allen keys on the top of the printed part, like in the picture. Align the pulley with the Allen key. And then once it's aligned, you can tighten the grub screw, rotate the pulley, and tighten the second grub screw. Okay, so I turn the motor just a little bit so that the cables are facing to the right. And I make sure that the flat part is facing me. Then I set the pulley and I start looking for the way that the grub screws are. It looks like one will be facing towards me and then the other one will be off kind of to the right a little bit. Then I set one Allen key on top, and then the smallest one is going to be the one to tighten the grub screw with. So you can see I have one grub screw facing towards me, and then I just kind of push the pulley up a little bit so that I'm not pushing it past the Allen key, but it helps kind of just keep it in the right position, and I tighten that one. You're trying to get the top of the pulley to be level with the top of the plastic part. And I did not have the right Allen key. It's actually a larger one that has a smaller end at the very end. Then turn the pulley completely around, and there's a grub screw on the other side. And tighten that one as well, and I do just double check that it still is flush with the top of the plastic piece. Okay, step 33, attaching the Y motor holder. We're going to take the protective film on the thermal pad and peel off the white part, and then we're going to stick it kind of centered over the motor. Then we'll peel off the blue side and stick it to the inside of the frame and secure it with screws. Okay, so I remove the white part of the thermal pad and stick it onto the motor, and I get it pretty well centered. Now I need to flip the frame around to the back, and I start just putting the screws in to make sure that they're going to be aligned correctly. And then I remove the blue part of the thermal pad. And before just sticking it in place, I do make sure that the screws are going to catch, and I do this with the top and the bottom. And then I just use the screws to kind of tighten it against the frame. And then to make sure that I don't squish this cable cord, I just kind of stick it through the buddy board on the side. Okay, we're at step 34. This is the end of chapter 2, so we can go ahead and have some gummy bears. The instructions say to eat 5. And I did manage to wait until the end of this chapter to open the bag. This video took me longer to edit than it even took me to film, so I am almost feeling like I need some more gummy bears right now. And step 35, it's done. So we're gonna make sure that everything looks like the picture. So I need to flip this back around, and everything looks good to me. I think that we're complete with chapter 2. Let me know your thoughts on the instructions, if you do like me skipping through some of the slower things, or if you really want it in real time. It took me about 2 hours to do the first step, but I did spend a lot of time dealing with different angles and trying to make sure that everything looked good. And I really appreciate you watching to the end. Thanks for watching.